Welcome friends to another r/MaliciousCompliance video. Today we've got a great compliance story getting extra money on the side, but first a story from Voyager VII, whatever you'd usually wear. This happened a long time ago in a friend group of mine. Julia, 27-year-old female at the time of the incident, was having a garden party. Julia was basically a good person but stressed out over tiny details easily, and when she was throwing a party, she could sometimes get a little, well, whatever the equivalent of bridezilla is if it's not actually a wedding. In this case, she was driving all of us girls nuts with her vision for her party, which included each of us in a different color, coordinated pastel dress so that we'd make a collective rainbow and similar antics. Enter Mickey, 24-year-old male. Mickey was and still is Julia's best friend. He definitely had a streak of mischief to him, and he was also the only one who could usually make Julia see how ridiculous she was being when she got like this. We asked him to talk to her about it, but he didn't get anywhere this time. Julia just said tiredly, "Please, let me have this. I've been working on it for months." Eventually, we ended up agreeing to wear what she wanted us to wear, so long as she paid for the dresses, which to her credit, she did. Meantime though, Mickey asked her what he was supposed to wear. Now, Julia's vision didn't really include specific plans for how the guys were going to dress. She just wanted them in suits or the like. So when Mickey asked her that, in the middle of a harried moment, she blurted, "I don't care, just wear whatever you'd normally wear to an outdoor party." Cue malicious compliance, or at least mischievous compliance, since I don't think there was serious malice involved. See, Mickey worked at a Ren fair. When he went to outdoor parties, which he did several times every summer, he attended as part of the staff, and he had a very specific costume he was supposed to wear. And so, on the day of the party, he shows up early, along with most of the rest of us, to help Julia set up, and he's wearing a full Ren Fair jester's costume, complete with cap and bells. To Julia's credit, her first reaction was to laugh her head off, her second was to swat him. Mickey did set up in the jester's outfit, and then finally admitted just before the party that he had a different outfit in his bag if she'd like him to change. He hadn't intended to really mess up her party, only to break her brain a little before it started. Julia eventually did tell him it would be nice if he'd go change, but she had to think about it. She admitted she was starting to think it might be worth it just to see how everybody else reacted to this perfectly set up garden party with a pseudo-medieval jester wandering around. I'm just imagining everybody showing up in these pretty pastel dresses, every other guy in a proper suit, and then you just got the town jester walking around with bells ringing as they waddle along. If you saw all of this go down, would you hope that they got to keep that jester outfit on and just kept wearing it for no reason? Or do you think that while the prank was funny, they should go back to the formal wear that everybody else is wearing? Let me know what way you'd roll in the comments down below. Our next story is from Advanced Law 3507, Confirmed People's Addresses. Several years ago, I worked for a telemarketing company doing what amounted to cold call sales. They had a trick of offering BS prize draws to get people's numbers and consent thanks to the fine print of the draw. They also had a super illegal policy that nobody was to be taken out of the database. Whether they asked, yelled, begged to be never called again, threatened legal action, or even pointed out that they were on my country's do not call list, didn't matter. We weren't allowed to take them off the list. Only if the caller was dead or no longer reachable at that number were we to strike them off. I was a student and needed the money, so I couldn't afford to fight the policy. But I could ask any caller that gave me reason to, "Are you sure that X lives there, or have they moved away?" If I had a video, I would have winked. I had gotten it to 2 people no longer at that number a shift before management pulled me up, and they hadn't proven what I was doing by the time I was finally able to quit. Honestly, for all the people out there that get blown up from telemarketers and spam callers, bless people like OP that actually give them a way to get off that list. Unless that company is a publicly identifiable US company, you're probably not getting off that list otherwise. Our next story is from MSP 1678. Threatened to sue me? Okay, you brought this on yourself. I work as a cashier for a small grocery chain. We carry a lot, and I mean a lot, of produce. So much so that we have multiple kinds of tomatoes, peaches, peppers, etc., organic and regular. And in some cases, different kinds of produce might have different prices. Different kinds of apples might have different prices. A California peach may be $1.50 more or less than a large white peach. Roma tomatoes and hothouse, aka beefsteak tomatoes, ring up a different price per pound amounts. Now, the somewhat annoying fact, from the perspective of the person who has to ring and weigh all this produce, is that while most of our items have their produce code stickers on them, not all of them do. So sometimes, cashiers have to guess. Now, this incident took place in the middle of my shift on a Sunday afternoon, which is the busiest day of the week. Not kidding, seriously. Our latest shipment of hothouse tomatoes were a bit small, so they were easily confused with our tomatoes on the vine. Believe it or not, those are a category all their own, so if there wasn't a sticker, I would have to examine them to see if I could figure out what kind they were. On this particular occasion, the hothouse tomatoes were on sale for approximately $1 less than the vine. An older guy, we'll call him Mr. Big Shot, who had that vaguely familiar face of a semi-regular, brings his order through my line. And he's made the semi-annoying choice to not only bag his tomatoes in one of those little rinky-dink bags you find in the produce department, but he's done it in such a way that, to avoid hurting his tomatoes, a real thing I've heard customers say, the bag's been inflated and tied, kind of like a chip bag. This particular practice really only serves to make it harder to tell what kind of items are in the bag. And of course, after examination, he's picked only the loveliest of tomatoes, the kind that doesn't have a sticker. So I give them a look and make the guess that these are vine tomatoes, ring him up, he pays, I move on to the next customer. However, 5 minutes later, he comes back up to me, spitting fire and fury, receipt clutched in his hand, and demands to speak to my manager. Won't tell me why, just spits at me that I'd better call a manager or he'll have my job. Okay, fine. The manager comes over, and Mr. Big Shot immediately launches into a full-scale tirade about how we scammed him. He's a lawyer, he's going to sue us, the store, the manager, and me, for everything we own over false advertising, because we charged him the $2.69 per pound for vine tomatoes instead of the $1.50 for the hothouse. The manager pulls him aside, gives him a refund for the tomatoes, a whole $3.49, and Big Shot sneers at me like he's won some huge victory over my lowly self as he leaves. My manager then comes up to me and tells me that I have to be extra careful in the future to make sure what kind of produce I'm ringing up to and including leaving my register to confirm the particular breed of tomato regardless of how busy we are, no matter what. Now, normally I'm a chill person. However, I'd just been threatened over an innocent mistake. And then I'm reprimanded for it in the middle of a busy store full of customers. Cue malicious compliance. Mr. Big Shot comes back in a week later and comes through my line with his smug little smile, once again with stickerless produce in bubble bags. I carefully ring up every item he has that isn't produce, taking my time to ensure that a line forms. I hurt my wrist yesterday, owie, sorry I can't move as fast as normal. Then I take a bag of one kind of produce, jostle it around in its bag so I can examine it, and decide that nope, I can't figure out what kind of apple this is. So I look up at Mr. Big Shot and in my most sweet and saccharine voice, ask him to show me where he got these apples from, because I can't figure it out. He grumbles, but because he's bent the little female cashier into submission, shows me the basket with the price tag. This happens 2 more times, but now he's getting impatient with me and snaps at me to just ring up the produce. I explained to him that because he brought me produce without a sticker, I had to make sure I was ringing him up for the right item. The lady behind him is of course giving us both dirty looks, and the people waiting behind her don't look too happy either. Mr. Big Shot demands a manager, so I quite happily go over to the loudspeaker and ask one to come over. Lo and behold, it's the same one from last time. Big Shot starts complaining loudly that I'm wasting his time, being rude, and making him walk over the store to figure out prices. The manager turns to me, confused and irritated, and demands to know what the heck I'm doing. I very calmly replied, well, you told me that I had to make sure, even if it meant leaving my register. Well, he had these items, gesturing at the produce in question, that don't have stickers. They look close enough to other kinds, and I don't know which basket they came from, so I asked him to show me. I'm only doing what you told me to. The manager gave me a funny look, assured Mr. Big Shot that everything would be taken care of later, and left. I finished ringing him up, he paid, and I moved on. Later that day, another member of the office staff came over and told me that the manager had said that if there wasn't a sticker, it was okay to just guess. Mr. Big Shot came through my lane a few more times, with less dramatic repeats of the same thing, until he either learned his lesson or just realized he needed to stop coming through my lane. Either way, I won. Now OP says they won, and they definitely got back at Mr. Big Shot here, and equally the manager, but working retail like that as a cashier, did anybody truly win in that situation? I feel bad for cashiers in general because it's like an inevitable game they play where at some point they're going to get somebody that is just awful to serve. If there's one surefire place you're going to end up getting a Karen experience one way or another from, it's going to be in the shoes of a cashier. Or should I say maybe vest. And our final story of the day is by VelocityBoy00. Wasn't made redundant like everyone else in the company, so kept showing up to work until the end to do nothing. This story is from June 2012, a week or so short of 10 years ago. I've generalized my exact work for anonymity. The story takes place in Australia, where we have very stringent laws around employment, firing, hiring, redundancies, maternity, etc., etc. Little bit of background, I'd started working for this particular company in March 2011. I was hired basically on the spot once I demonstrated my knowledge of the product that I would be working on, and started 2 days later because of a deadline that had to be met. I had a very specific contract for what I did. I was thrown in the deep end. A sleepless 7 days followed, but by the end, I managed to do a decent job on the first of many products. 2 months after I started, my direct boss, general manager, was let go, and not really replaced properly, but a consultant took over their responsibilities. I should also add that a majority of the operations were in Australia, while a smaller team operated in the UK, which is also where the CEO was based, despite 80 to 90% of products coming out of our office. Towards the third quarter of 2011, the CEO's contract ended and wasn't renewed. So the hunt began for a new CEO who was eventually found and began also working in the UK location. After a very busy 2011, hiring approximately 30 new employees and launching a bunch of new products, business was booming until the second week of January 2012. By this point, upper management couldn't stay on top of everything, bringing in the COO of the parent company to oversee operations in Australia. Because we had a lot going on, but the CEO was based in the UK and new. At this point, we had a group meeting where we learned the future of the company and that operations in Australia would cease on June 30th, 2012, end of the fiscal year in Australia. This was followed by management explaining that everyone except a handful of people would be made redundant with payouts. The handful who would remain would instead be made redundant after finishing their projects at the end of 2012. So over the next 5 months, as operations were slowly winding up and people started to exit the company, I'd lined up a few job interviews. One of these was my dream job. Based in Europe, working in the exact field I wanted to be in. I kept this quiet, telling only a handful of my closest friends at my still current job. The recruitment process took quite a few weeks. Many late nights, Skype interviews, general chats. It was a big job and a massive interview process, and towards the end of May, I'm still in the running for this dream job, and by this point, pretty much everyone knows, wishing me luck. Around comes the start of June, and everyone starts to get their redundancy letters, giving them 28 days of official notice, outlining their pay schedules and all legal entitlements. When I say everyone, I mean everyone except me. I find this very strange, but quickly realize it's because if I hand in my notice, I won't be entitled to a payout and the company gets to save a few $1,000s. This is where my malicious compliance kicks in. I keep quiet and don't say anything. By about the second week of June, I find out that I didn't get my dream job, and I tell one other person, but make sure they don't tell anyone else. Fast forward to the last week of June, and now there's just 7 employees, including me, left in the office, alongside the GM, COO, and CFO. Everyone, except me, has packed up their desks, and at this point just showing up to basically be social and reminisce. On the second to last day, I run into the COO. Remember, he was from the parent company brought in to oversee the winding up of operations. Next to my desk, and he goes, you must be saddened that tomorrow's the last day. Casually, I respond with, oh, is it? I know it'll be quiet, but I didn't realize it's my last day. He takes a closer look at my desk, still not packed up, has the most confused look on his face and responds with, yeah, it's everyone's last day. Why wouldn't it be your last? I say, oh, I never got a redundancy letter. At this point, I can see the expression on his face go from, huh, to, oh crap, in the hope that I would get a different job and resign so I don't get redundancy entitlements. Among everything else going on, between the GM, COO, and CFO, they forgot to issue me an official redundancy notice. At this point, he realizes all this and goes, oh, come and see me in my office in 30 minutes. Half an hour later, I go to his office. He's sitting there with the CFO by his side, but also kind of behind him. There's a few papers on his desk. I sit down and he starts, sorry we didn't do this properly at an earlier point, but here's all your redundancy paperwork. The first piece of paper is the official letter. I pick it up, start reading, and the first thing that catches my eye is the date. It's been backdated to 27 days previously. Now, this is a 2-copy letter that needs to be signed by both employer and employee. I put it down and go, that's not today's date. He gets flustered and responds with, sorry we forgot to get to you, but the notice was issued on that day. I say it might have been issued then, but this is the first I'm seeing of it, and you'll note it hasn't been signed by me. He says yes, but you knew this was coming. I say I did, but I assumed I'd be retained for longer because I wasn't given official notice. He says, what do you want us to do now? I say put today's date on it, and I'll sign it. He says, but legally we need to wrap up operations before the end of the month. We can't do that. I say you could try to fire me instead, but I don't think Fair Work Commission would be satisfied with your reason of me not wanting to sign a falsified redundancy letter. By this point, he's very flustered. Meanwhile, I'm just laughing my butt off in my head. He says, okay, let me change this for you. He disappears, comes back with another copy with the correct date. Okay, here you go. I say, I'm not signing this yet. He says, why not? I say, well, I've got 28 more days of legal employment now, which means I'm owed an extra day and a bit of annual leave in my final pay schedule. He looks at the CFO and the CFO looks at him and nods in agreement. He changes my payout schedule, adding another day of annual leave to it, prints it out, and hands it to me. I carefully look over everything. It's all in order now. I sign the paperwork. We both get copies. He says, so what will you be doing here for the next 28 days? I say nothing. I'm not coming back after today. He says, but you're legally employed for another 4 weeks. We can't be paying you for nothing. You should help out the IT guy and pack up some boxes. I say there's nothing in my contract about packing up boxes, so I won't be doing that. Also, if you read my contract, it says I'm employed to work on this one specific project only. And any other work outside of this needs to be agreed on separately, and since you sold my project to the competition yesterday and is no longer at this company, I have no further contractual obligations to fulfill. By this point, the CFO is barely holding in his laughter. He says, well, that's not fair. We have to pay you an extra month for nothing? I say that's not my problem. My contractual obligations have been fulfilled. I'm going to pack up and go home at 5 p.m. He says, okay, please make sure it's not before 5 p.m. I get back to my desk and pack it up in less than 5 minutes, put all my personal belongings in a box, and just sit around doing nothing. One of my colleagues who was remaining for a few more months comes over and asks, what was that all about? I explain everything in detail. He lets out the biggest booming laugh, goes to his office, closes the door, and continues laughing. 15 minutes later, the CFO comes over and goes, you don't have to stay until the end of the day. You can take off whenever you want. And this is the story of how I got an extra month's pay due to management's incompetence. I mean, I totally understand why management did what they did, but frankly, at some level, you gotta accept that it seems like this guy is not going to get a new job or leave on their own volition, and you need to cut bait. Clearly, whoever was responsible for that just kind of forgot at some point, and it really cost them. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another malicious compliance story that was even more insane than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video, or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. And with that said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.